Hello everyone, today I will continue telling you the story about the single mother, Diệu Hân. I hope you enjoy watching this video. After serving his sentence, Han's abusive husband staggered out of the prison gate in his faded, tattered clothes. Outside no one was waiting. He stood there in hesitation, in the middle of the empty ground, watching strangers pass by indifferently. The feeling of abandonment, of being rejected by the whole world, choked him with rage. He had once thought that when he returned, there would be a place to call home, someone to rely on, but it was nothing but an illusion. His old friends had already turned their backs, and his family saw him only as a disgrace. In the first days he drifted like a vagabond. He slept on sidewalks at night, wandered around the market by day, looking for small chores in exchange for a meal. But no one wanted to hire an ex-convict whose eyes always glimmered with menace. Hunger tormented his body, and his pride gnawed at his sanity. Then a familiar name began to echo in his mind, Hân. To him, that woman was not only his ex-wife but also the cause of his downfall. He believed that if it weren't for Hân's resistance and escape, he would not have lost everything, would not have ended up behind bars. Thinking of her living peacefully with their child drove him mad. At first, the thought of seeking her out was fleeting, but each time his stomach ached with hunger and anger boiled up inside him, that thought grew stronger, rooting itself like a poisonous seed. One gloomy night, under a drizzling rain, he made his decision. The narrow dirt path leading into the poor neighborhood where Hân lived had hardly changed. Under the dim yellow streetlights, humble houses stood in a row, faint kitchen smoke rising from late dinners. He walked slowly, inhaling deeply, his chest brimming with a seething hatred. Then Hân's small house appeared. The old tiled roof, though worn, was tidy, the window slightly ajar, warm yellow light spilling through the crack. The scene only fueled his fury. In his mind there was only one question. Why should Hân live in peace while he had nothing but emptiness? He approached, his calloused hand clenching into a fist, veins bulging on the back of it. A loud bang shook the frail wooden door. Then another, fierce, relentless. "Hân, get out here. Did you think you could escape me?" he bellowed, his voice hoarse with rage and hunger. Inside, Hân was lulling her child to sleep when the pounding made her freeze. Terror surged through her body. She clutched her little one tightly, retreating to the corner, her eyes fixed on the door as if staring at a demon trying to break in. Her heart raced, her hands turned cold, and old memories stormed back. The beatings, the bruises, the nights of silent tears. She had believed she had escaped that hell forever, yet now it was at her doorstep. Outside, his furious shouts echoed in the rainy night, like a storm threatening to shatter the fragile peace she had built over the years. The pounding gradually weakened, then ceased. After screaming himself hoarse, the brute collapsed. His breath came out in smoky wisps in the damp air, his shoulders trembling. He slumped against the door like a cornered beast. The rain stopped, leaving only heavy drops falling from the old roof, dripping steadily by the porch. The night was so quiet that even his coughs and shifting body seemed loud enough to pierce the thin walls, reminding Hân that danger was still just a door away. Inside, Hân sat trembling against the wall, clutching her child tightly to her chest. The baby slept soundly, occasionally stirring, tiny hands gripping her shirt. Hân kissed the child's forehead, holding back tears, her weary eyes shadowed by dread. She dared not sleep, for a single lapse could let him break in at any moment. Time crawled. The old clock ticked like knives cutting into her nerves. Outside he muttered obscenities, sometimes breaking into chilling laughter. Then he sprawled across the threshold, his head pressed against the door, as if to block her escape with his very body. "Just wait," he hissed through clenched teeth. "By morning you won't be able to hide. You'll have to open the door, Hân. You'll have to face me." The night slowly faded, leaving behind a pale sky. Roosters crowed in the distance, announcing dawn. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, slipping into the small house. Hans sat motionless, her back aching from sitting upright all night. Her eyes were swollen red, her mind torn between fear and despair. She knew that once daylight came, nothing would stay hidden. He would still be there, sprawled on her porch, soaked with dew, his clothes clinging to him, eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness. The neighbors would surely notice. Yet that very thought gave her a faint glimmer of hope. The light of day, the presence of others, might be the shield she and her child desperately needed. Even so, the suffocating fear of being trapped all night long had already drained her strength. Outside he remained, eyes open wide, staring into nothing. Only one thought consumed him. He had to see Han, had to make her realize that he still existed, that he was the nightmare she could never escape. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the leaves, illuminating the lingering dew on the old tiled roof, a decision stirred in Han's heart. She knew that if she kept silent, he would remain at her door, haunting her. She couldn't let her child wake up to this horrifying scene. Taking a deep breath, she laid her child gently on the bed, pulled a thin blanket over him, and stepped toward the door. Her trembling hand touched the latch. Her heart pounded violently, each beat threatening to burst out of her chest. She knew that once the door opened, the past would come rushing back, raw and brutal. But dawn had arrived, and in that light, Han no longer wanted to run forever. Click. The latch gave way with a faint sound that seemed deafening to them both. The wooden door creaked open just enough for morning light to pour in. The brute leapt to his feet, his bloodshot eyes gleaming after a sleepless night. Seeing Han's face behind the door, he curled his lips into a twisted smile, part joy, part menace. "At last, you had to open the door for me," he rasped, voice hoarse but triumphant. Han stood still, one hand gripping the edge of the door as if to stop it from opening any wider. Her face was pale, but in her eyes flickered something more than fear. There was resolve. "What more do you want? I've already given you everything I could. How long will you keep tormenting me and my child?" she said, her voice trembling. Yet each word forced its way out with determination. He let out a dry laugh, stepping closer, his filthy hands pressing against the frame as though he could break it down at any moment. "I have nothing, but you have everything. I can't accept that." In that instant, only a fragile door separated them. On one side, the shadow of torment; on the other, the faint glow of freedom and peace. The air grew heavy, the tension so sharp it felt ready to shatter with the smallest movement. He pressed harder, making the door shudder. His twisted grin contorted into a feral snarl. "Do you think you can keep me out, Han? This was once my house. You have no right to drive me away," he roared, eyes blazing like a beast. Han's frail hands trembled as she clung to the door with all her strength. She knew that if it gave way, he would storm inside, and nothing could stop him then. "This is no longer your home. You lost the right to be a husband, a father long ago," Han cried, her voice breaking but fierce. The door burst wider under his shove. A rough hand thrust through the gap, clawing for a grip to pull it open. Han screamed, pushing back with all her might. The struggle was brutal. One consumed with rage, the other a fragile woman fortified only by a mother's love. The pounding rattled the small house. In the bedroom, the child woke, screaming in terror, his cries piercing the air. Han's tears blurred her vision, but she screamed back, her voice raw. "Leave us alone." Outside, his breath reeked through the crack as he growled. His strength was overwhelming. One more push and the door would collapse. Just then, dogs barked loudly from the neighbor's yard, and the sound of running footsteps drew near. Startled neighbors, roused by the commotion and the child's cries, began gathering in the alley. Voices rang out. "Something's happening at Han's house. It looks like her ex-husband's causing trouble again." The crowd grew, whispers spreading through the neighborhood. He faltered, unease flickering in his eyes. He hated being seen in this state, a failure, ragged and despised. But his fury was not quenched. He glared through the crack, voice low and guttural. "Don't think the neighbors can stop me. Hon, I'll be back." With that, he yanked his hand free, stumbled back, and fled down the dirt road, disappearing into the misty dawn. Inside, Han collapsed to the floor, her whole body shaking as tears streamed down her face. Her child still sobbed, clinging tightly to her. After a sleepless night of terror, she realized the nightmare was far from over. It had only just returned. The door shook violently under a barrage of fists. He roared, curses echoing through the deserted alley. "You treacherous woman! Did you think you could escape me? You owe me your whole life. Open the door now!" Each thundering blow rattled the fragile wooden door, dust falling in small clouds, the latch clattering with a chilling sound. Inside, Han clutched her child in panic, sobbing as she tried to soothe him. The child's terrified cries, mingling with the curses outside, created a horrifying symphony. Exhausted, Han pressed her trembling hands against the door, her back braced against it, as if her body alone could separate two worlds, one a fragile home, the other a raging ghost from her past. "I'll smash this rat hole apart. I'll never let you live in peace, Han. Do you hear me?" he bellowed, his hoarse voice spraying spit with every word. The racket roused the entire neighborhood. Lights flickered on, voices whispered. "It's him again. God, he just got out of prison and he's already causing trouble. Call the police or Han and her child will be in danger." But he didn't stop. The more he heard the murmurs, the more frenzied he became, pounding harder, cursing and laughing like a madman. The little house trembled as though it might collapse under his fury. Han knew that if the door gave way, everything would be lost. The pounding grew more frantic, his curses piercing the night air, drowning even the sound of wind through the bamboo. Han shook uncontrollably, holding her screaming child tighter, despair gnawing at her. Just then, hurried footsteps thundered from the alley's entrance. "Han!" A familiar voice broke through the darkness. Han lifted her tearful eyes and saw Tan charging forward. He flung his motorbike to the ground without bothering to prop it up, sprinting straight to her porch. The abusive husband froze for a moment, then sneered mockingly. "Ah, so it's you, the wannabe hero. You dare meddle in my marriage." Tan stepped closer, his breath ragged from running, but his eyes cold, his voice like steel, every word sharp as a blade. "You lost the right to call Han your wife long ago. From today, you will never hurt her again. Who do you think you are to talk to me like that?" he snarled, lunging forward, veined hands ready to shove Tan aside. But Tan blocked him instantly. Grabbing his collar, he shoved him back down onto the steps. Their eyes locked, one blazing red with madness, the other burning with the fire of protection. Inside, Han held her breath, her heart pounding as the door rattled under the struggle. She had never seen Tan so unyielding. The brute writhed, cursing, his breath ragged. But after a sleepless night of hunger and exhaustion, his strength was nearly spent. Under Tana's pressure, a flicker of fear glinted in his eyes. Tan held him firm, his voice low yet thunderous. "Listen well. If you dare come near Han's house again, I won't let you off. This is not your place to destroy." The brute glared, wheezing, spitting broken curses. Yet beneath Tana's grip, his bravado faltered. Inside, Han cradled her child as tears streamed down her face. Amid the chaos, an unfamiliar peace spread in her heart. For the first time, she was no longer facing the ghost of her past alone. Pinned down by Tana's grip, the brute growled and thrashed in desperation. His foul breath mixed with sweat, rain, and night dew streaming down his gaunt face. In that brief moment, he realized he no longer had the strength to fight. Tan was too resolute, too unyielding. Grinding his teeth, a dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. Suddenly, he jerked his shoulder, twisting free from Tana's grasp. Stumbling a few steps, he stood in the yard, panting heavily. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Tan, then onto the doorway where Han clutched her child in trembling arms. A twisted smile spread across his face, the smile of a man defeated, yet unwilling to admit it. "I'll be back. You think you can protect her forever? One day, I'll make her and that child pay." His hoarse voice cracked, but the words carried a bone-chilling menace. With that, he turned and staggered down the alley, his shadow dissolving into the pale morning mist. Tan stood motionless, fists clenched, veins bulging, his heart pounding. Only when silence settled did he turn back and step into the house. Han collapsed onto the floor, clutching her child as tears streamed down her cheeks. When Tan gently touched her shoulder, she lifted her swollen eyes, filled with gratitude and fear. "He'll come back," she whispered, trembling. Tan squeezed her shoulder, his gaze unwavering. "And I'll be here. I won't let him lay a hand on you or the baby ever again." Morning light poured into the small house, chasing away the night's shadows. Yet the brute's chilling threat still lingered, like a dark cloud hanging over their fragile home. As his figure disappeared completely into the mist, quiet slowly returned. Only the rustling whine through the erica trees and the ragged breaths of mother and child remained. Tan closed the door firmly, checking the latch with care. He turned to Han, fragile and trembling as she held her baby close. His heart tightened. "Don't be afraid anymore," he said softly, his voice steady yet warm. "I won't let him hurt you." Han raised her tear-stained face, eyes clouded with fear and doubt. She stammered, "But he said he'll come back. I don't know what to do." Tan sat beside her, wrapping his arm around her like a shield against the storm outside. With his hand resting on her shoulder, he spoke each word with weight. "If he comes back, I'll be here. From now on, you and the baby won't face this alone." At that moment, Han's tears flowed again, but this time not only from fear. A fragile spark of trust had been lit. She hugged her child tighter, letting him drift into sleep in her arms. Watching them, Tana's heart surged with fierce resolve. He pulled a chair close to the door, sitting upright, eyes fixed on the yard like a silent sentry. His tall frame stood firm, the only shield for the small home. Outside, the morning light spread wider, illuminating his face with determination. The long haunting night had passed, but Tan knew this was only the beginning. The brute would return, and when he did, Tan would still be there, ready to protect Han and her child with everything he had. After a sleepless night, as morning light flooded the small house, Han was still trembling. The threats of her ex-husband echoed in her ears, making it impossible to calm down. Her child had just drifted back to sleep, but Han knew that if she didn't act, the nightmare would only continue. Beside her, Tan sat in silence. He had stayed awake all night, dark circles under his eyes, yet still alert, quietly watching every movement of Han. Seeing her clutching her child, worry etched in her gaze, he spoke softly. "Han, I think you should report this to the police. His threats against you and the child are too clear. Without legal measures, he'll come back." Han stayed silent for a long moment. Inside, she was torn. Afraid to confront him, dreading complicated procedures, and fearful of gossip spreading through the village. But then she remembered the night before. The thunderous pounding on the door, the violent curses, the child's terrified screams in her arms. Suddenly she realized she had no choice. She nodded, her voice small but resolute. "Yes, I'll go. I can't let my child live in fear any longer." That morning, Tan accompanied Han to the commune police station. The road was familiar, but her steps felt heavy, her hand clenching the edge of her blouse. Tan walked beside her, glancing at her now and then, his eyes full of encouragement. At the station, Han recounted everything, from the abuse of the past to the night before, when her ex-husband came to harass, pounding on the door, shouting threats. Her voice trembled, but each word rang true. Tan sat beside her, adding details whenever needed. The officer wrote everything down carefully, then spoke firmly. "Don't worry. We'll summon him for questioning, issue a warning and open a monitoring file. If he repeats this, we'll take strict action. The law will protect you and your child." Hearing those words, Han felt part of her burden lift. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but at least she had taken a stand to seek rightful protection for herself and her child. On the way back, the early breeze rustled through the trees. Han held her child close, turned to Tan, and smiled softly through her tears. Last night she had only fear. But today she had hope, hope in the law, and in the man walking quietly by her side. The news that Han had reported him to the police quickly reached the abusive husband. Just a few days later, commune officers came to the areas he usually loitered around, but he was nowhere to be found. Acquaintances said he had disappeared early on, and no one knew where he had gone. In truth, the moment he heard the police had opened a file and wanted to summon him, he panicked. Deep down, he knew that if he were arrested again, his life would truly be over. No more chances to do as he pleased. So, he hurriedly gathered a few ragged belongings and wandered out of the village, leaving everything behind. But leaving didn't mean giving up. At night, as he dragged himself along strange roads, he still ground his teeth, his mind filled only with Han's face and Tana's determined eyes. His hatred didn't fade. It only sank deeper, festering inside him. Back in the small house, Han heard the news that he had fled. She sat in silence, feeling both relieved and uneasy. Relieved that, for now, she and her child were safe. Uneasy because she knew a man like him would not vanish so easily. Tan, however, was different. After sitting in thought for a long time, he finally spoke to Han. "Don't think his leaving means it's over. He might hide for a while, but the hatred in his heart hasn't burned out. We must always stay cautious." Han nodded, her hand clutching her child's clothes tightly. She understood the road ahead would still be uncertain. But unlike before, this time, she was no longer alone. Outside, the sunset stretched across the sky, birds flying back to their nests. Inside the small house, peace returned for the moment, though somewhere beyond the horizon, the shadow of a storm still lingered.
Xin chào mọi người. Rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Chúc mọi người một ngày mới vui vẻ, hạnh phúc và có một ngày làm việc đầy năng lượng. Hy vọng rằng những video của kênh mình sẽ mang đến niềm vui cho mọi người và đặc biệt là chia sẻ cho mọi người hiểu hơn về câu chuyện của những người mẹ đơn thân sinh sống ở Việt Nam. Hiện tại những video của mình thì thường được phát hành vào lúc 7 giờ theo khung giờ Việt Nam, thì mọi người nhớ chú ý đón xem nha. Và nếu cảm thấy yêu thích kênh của mình thì mọi người nhớ like, share, bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất, để không bỏ lỡ một video nào. Nhớ để lại cho mình một nhận xét ở dưới phần bình luận để những video sau mình sẽ cải thiện hay và hấp dẫn hơn cho mọi người xem. Cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video của mình nha. Rất mong được sự ủng hộ của mọi người để kênh mình càng ngày càng phát triển hơn. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại mọi người.